There's an important time for food plotting in the whitetail woods, and I think a lot of people are missing that opportunity for great food plots at a time where deer really need it the most. We talk about spring food plots, but it's not what you're planting right now. We need to back up. And so a lot of my plantings throughout the years, and this is going back all the way back into the UP times, back into 99, 2000, 2001, I've incorporated rye. And the UP was a soil builder, but what I found was pretty interesting when I had clover. There's a time where I could look down a long strip of food plot, say 150-yard leg. I'm thinking of a particular food plot in the UP, Michigan, south of Munising that I have in my mind. And before spring green up, the deer that were coming back from the deer yards, you'd have 12, 15 deer on the left side of the food plot and none on the right side. Well, the left side was where that rye was, and that's that thick base of rye. I talk about layering rye. You can look that up on Google, results of layering rye, but I talk about layering rye to try to make more of a thick sod base. So you're either planting rye 3 times or twice, 200 pounds, 100 pounds, 100, 100, 100. But bottom line is rye and wheat will still be green in the spring. Interesting, you'd see those deer feeding on that half of the food plot in the rye. The other half was older clover. The clover doesn't wake up as soon as rye does. And right now, we just had snow a few days ago. It's melted and the rye is standing straight up and the deer are able to browse on it. So I'm looking at when that rye is coming in, it's hitting a very important time in the deer woods. It's 2 to 4 weeks before spring green up, sometimes longer. That rye is available before clover, and it's 4 to 6 weeks before alfalfa, because that wakes up even after clover. So great spring food plots begin in the fall. And to go back to that story with deer, something that's interesting is those deer would feed heavily on that rye as soon as spring green up took place. Those 12 to 15 deer in the rye would turn into 2 to 3 deer in the clover. The reason for that is instead of those deer congregating on the property, there's times where I went for a walk and saw 20 to 30 deer, bunch of grouse, bunch of snowshoe rabbits, a lot of wildlife out there. But that was at a time where there was nothing else green in the woods. So the rye was at a real premium. Often it's not the overall value of your planting that makes it the most important food plot that you can add on your property. It's the value of that food source that you're adding compared to the local habitat. So when the local habitat is a 0, 1, or 2, or 3, and you're offering rye that would be more of a 5, 6, 7 as far as on the whole scale. Let's say brassica, beans, or alfalfa was more a 9 or 10 out of 10. This is at a time when there's nothing else in the woods and those other glamour crops wouldn't be growing or are not available. So at that time, the rye is a premium. The clover, once spring green up takes place, is not a premium. Deer have food everywhere, literally everywhere in the north half of the country. They do not want for anything, and they have all the food they want, and that's why the deer spread out. They go back into their traditional fawning grounds. They're in their summer ranges. They're spread out because there's food everywhere. There's probably 5 times more food during the summer months than they actually need, and there's a real limiting amount of food during the winter time. And think about it. You're adding these fall food plots, and I often looked at it in the UP of Michigan, the deer getting a huge boost in nutrition before they go in the deer yards. You're sending the deer down to the deer yards in really good shape because they were able to eat on your fall greens in September and October when the weeds and local vegetation have been dead for months. Acorns are gone or no mass production. You're sending the deer into the deer yards. I even had just some of the stuff you hear. It's like if you look at a lot of YouTube channels, Facebook pages, you know, everyone's an expert nowadays, but back in the day there was biologists who would talk about that it was a bad thing that I gave those deer that extra shot of nutrition before sending them to the deer yards, because he complained that they were super deer going down into the deer yards, out competing all the other deer for food and leaving all the other deer wanting because these super deer that were on steroids because of these great greens and food were out competing all the other deer for necessary forage during the winter time. I say you're just trying to do your best. I thought it was kind of humorous that someone would make that up. But think about that food that they are getting before the wintertime. And then wintertime, a lot of times there's not much you can do about it, especially us with smaller properties. You know, on this property, I'm able to have some corn, some brassica that lasts, but a lot of small parcels that I work on for clients don't have that luxury of adding a huge winter food source that the deer can actually dine on all winter. So you're really looking at that fall time Rye should be an important part of your green blends, even adding it over failed brassica plantings or planting it and adding it over beans and peas and oats like we recommend in the WHS fall blend with Northwoods Whitetails. So we can add those mixes, add rye. They're an appreciable portion of all our green plots, at least 50%. We're adding at least 200 pounds per acre, sometimes more. We're layering. That gives the deer and makes sure that they have food during warm-ups all the way through December. And then when the spring breaks and things are warming up, we have a lot of our plots in rye. And you can see right now the farm fields are bare, but when you look across these plots here, you can see how much green is in this plot. It doesn't seem like a lot, but every one of these pieces of rye, if you look down here, we have a lot of rye that's been clipped off, and the deer are chopping it off and they're feeding on it and they're nipping these off, and it's giving them a lot of nutritional value at a time when there's nothing else in the deer woods. And that's times this entire plot and 8 acres of green that we have. We have an appreciable amount of green, and it doesn't take much because this rye just starts shooting up. We're getting rain this afternoon, evening, tomorrow, and on Wednesday too. And so this time right here, before clover, before alfalfa, long before beans, long before any of your summer plots, if you're even planting summer plots, this nutrition right here, spring green up time, is one of the most critical times in the deer woods. It's post-winter recovery, but it's also a time that is the most missed opportunity with deer managers and food plotters all around the country. Because if you have bare dirt right now, brassica was eaten down to the ground, the beans are gone, the corn's gone, alfalfa isn't woken up, clover's not awake yet, you have this rye. If you don't have rye or wheat at this time of year, you're really missing out. And I'll go as far to say that this time right now with spring green up, when deer are in their post-winter recovery time, fawns are going to be dropping here in a couple months, month and a half. Antlers will be starting to grow, not that long, 5-6 weeks away. They're really starting to be popping. You'll see those big bases. This is at a time where deer need it the most, far more than summer food plots. Summer food plots are at a time, again, where it's a time of abundance in the woods. You're not really making a dent in the amount of food that you're offering. This springtime right now is critical. And again, it goes back to the difference in quality of the local habitat. Let's say rye is only a 5. Let's say the local habitat's a 0 or 1. Just do the math. You're getting 4 or 5 of a boost, points of a boost out of 10 compared to the local habitat. Let's say beans or alfalfa, even clover is a 10 out of 10 during the summer. Let's say the local habitat's an 8 or a 9 out of 10. You're only getting a change of 1 or 2. That's at a time where the deer aren't stressed. They're stressed right now. We're still getting frost and freeze at night, lots of cold. They need that energy. They don't need that at that level during the summertime. Think about it. Are you hitting this time in the deer woods? This is a critical time for food plots. Are you hitting your spring food plot opportunity? I hope you're not missing that out. This rye, wheat, easy to throw on the ground. That's how we actually plant this. You're broadcasting it over peas and beans. Again, those peas and beans are gone this time of year. They were gone last fall, but what we're left with is this beautiful rye. It'll actually thicken up quite a bit over the coming weeks. And you can bet before spring green up, we're March 22nd right now. We're gonna have an early spring this year, but we're still 2 or 3 weeks away. The deer have been dining on this, even in the snow, for the last couple weeks. And it's a great addition to your food plot program. Don't miss out on these spring plantings. Not only is it the most important spring type planting that you can have, the rye or the wheat, and even down south, you could even extend it to oats because those oats aren't dying out over the winter time like they do up here at north. I've been in the UP of Michigan where the oats have been dead by the end of November. They're brown, they're not offering anything. So that's why I incorporate a high percentage of rye and wheat. Again, critically important. Don't miss out. Don't put food plots and efforts into summer without covering this hole right now. And whether it's a failed brassica planting or you're planting on this with beans and peas like we do in the different mixes that we've planted for years, and you're adding that layer of rye over. A lot of times we're planting those beans and peas August 1st around here, and then we're adding 200 pounds of winter rye per acre around Labor Day. You want to stagger those. You do not want to plant those at the same time. They are two separate. You don't plant rye, wheat, or oats with brassicas, peas, or beans. They're two separate planting times, and it'll pay big time when you're actually offering this food during the springtime. Don't miss out. Your deer will be happy for you, and it's a great way to add nutrition for the deer herd at a time when the local habitat is at its lowest for the entire season. Hey guys, I really appreciate you watching today's video. We're out here having some fun today. We're planting some switchgrass, cutting some timber, making some bedding areas, but most importantly, we're putting it all together, and that's critical. Any habitat improvements that you're making, you can't just make improvements because it's a good spot. You have to link those together so that helps your hunt this fall. Really, I encourage you to check out my web classes. The link is in the description. It's helped a lot of folks design their properties and do what we're out here having fun doing right now.